Cool. So today, in our last meetup, we walked through when you have Keycloak, and I'll show the Keycloak that Keylogic has, how to go through the process of managing the Keycloak account. And today we're going to go take a few steps back and discuss how you actually set up a Keycloak using from an AWS server, kind of from scratch, and how that whole process works. I'm just signing in here so I can show you guys. So as a debrief from the last time, you have your kind of Keycloak account, you have your groups and your users, and through this, you're able to use Keycloak as an external authenticator for users in your database. And again, we went over this last time, and we have the video if anybody wants it after the call. We can show that to you guys. So now we're going to look at what happens beforehand. So I have an AWS account. This is my account. And I'm in what's called the EC2 section, which is where you would create your instances. You start by you can see we don't have any instances running in here. You start by just launching the instance. And this is where you actually create an instance. We're going to call it our CFDG Keycloak. And we're going to use Ubuntu, but we're actually, this is the version that's showing here is 22.04. We're going to use 2020.04. And the only reason why we're doing that is because that's what they used. That's what was used in the example that we saw. And I just want to make sure that there's nothing else that would cause this process to not work. For instance type, when I'm setting up a server like this, I like to make the instance type large. So I'm actually going to do the T3A extra large. And this is, I think there's a 2XL, but extra large is big enough. And the reason why I like to make the instance type really large when you're setting this process up is because there are a number of steps during the process of putting Keycloak into the server that will require some heavy processing. And so having a large server will make that process happen more quickly. Especially today, I don't want you guys sitting around waiting if I had a smaller server. What I normally do is I set up the server, get everything working, and then come back in and change the instance type to a small. And this is something that you can change at any time. Getting a key pair, we're going to create a new key pair. We're going to call this CFDG Keycloak, and just use all this, and it'll download it to your default downloads of your browser, which is just my downloads folder. We're going to create a security group, allow SSH traffic, and I'm going to pick just for my IP address, allow HTTPS, which is port 443, and allow HTTP, which is port 80, which will all be needed for this. We're not going to change this, and we're moving on to launching the instance. Any questions about this so far? Nope. All right. So now when we look at our instances, it will show up here. And you can see the status is still initializing. So it's still getting itself set up. So in the meantime, we can go and click this. Actually, before we do that, we're going to do a couple of things. First of all, we're going to go into our Elastic IPs, and we already set up an Elastic IP address. And this is pretty much a static IP address that we can allocate to the server. That way the server's IP address never changes. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then what I've already done, and I'll show it here in our on our DNS server, is I've already gone ahead and added I've already gone ahead and added this server as this IP address as a subdomain on our server, which will allow us to use keycloak.keyologic.com as the URL for the Keycloak server. So going back into here, another thing that we will need to do is we'll need to go into that security group that we created and just add one additional port. So we're going to edit inbound rules. We're going to add one additional port, which is port 8443. And we're going to add it to this 0.0. This just means that it's open to the world, basically. And that port we just temporarily need during the installation process. And then after the installation is done, then we'll remove that port. All right, so going into instances, now this instance should be running. We can go and we can click this connect button, and we're going to use SSH client, and it'll give us some instructions and some.
I don't see that one on my thing. I'm just not able to see that on my screen.
All right. Okay, so any questions so far, first of all?
Nope.
All right, cool. So now we're going to get into actually doing some work on the using terminal on the actual Linux side of the server. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to maneuver to the my downloads folder, because that's where I actually have this the private key file. Then we're going to run this command, which ensures the key is not publicly viewable. And if you don't run this command, then it won't allow for this command to work. Now we're going to run this command. And looks like it's doing its thing. running. Nope. Hold on 1 second. I just want to make sure using the right IP address. So yeah, actually, the IP address that was there before was incorrect. There we go. Oh, let's run this again. Okay, so let's go and let's find that file. Actually, oh. I think I may actually have two of the file, and that's why that's happening. Yeah. I want to open it with just Sublime Text. Okay. Let's try that again. Ah, okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do, because I think what I did was I actually had that exact two of this file set up. So what I'm going to do quickly is just redo this whole process, which I'll do pretty quickly. So apologies for that.
Grace under pressure. You're doing good.
I'm going to create a brand new key player. I'm just going to call this. Definitely don't have another one with that name. And now, because we already created that security group, we can just use the existing security group that we already created and launch the instance. And Now it'll show up here, and I'm gonna go and change its elastic IP. All right, so now, and it's still initializing, but we should be able to at least get through this process. And I think there we go, that's using the right thing. So let's try this. Oh, we didn't do this. Okay, so that means that there's something else going on here, because I know that I have the file in my downloads folder. I'm on my downloads folder on the computer. It's definitely here.
Is it expecting that PEM file?
Well, the PEM file is it's included in this. Right, so it's saying ssh-i, then here's the PEM file, and then it's saying Ubuntu at, and then here's our IP, and this is kind of the EC2 name, which is,
Which is what you assigned it, yeah.
yeah. So that all should work. And what I'm running into now, which I had never run into before, is which is that it's just not running.
And Justin, this is Robert.
Yep.
And I'm just reading from the screen because I'm really not familiar with that that setup, but it looks like there's a hidden SSH folder in your user folder where it says there's something not expected. So I don't know if we should be looking over there.
Oh, you're talking about with on the security group?
Well, it says add correct key in /user/justin/.ssh/known hosts, you know. So I think that's on. I just don't know if that's on the VM or on your local machine, but there's something about this path that seems to be involved, no?
Yeah, you may be right there. I see. Host 17. Okay, so I think if I go into this, So this is just the, you can see here, this is just the
Private key.
private key. So I just don't know.
I wish I could help you, but I'm afraid I don't know either.
So I think this might have to do with the fact that I set up the elastic IP on it on the server. I have a feeling it has something to do with that. Let me see.
Are you thinking there may be some delay on the elastic IP?
Yeah. Okay, so there's other ways to connect to this. Let's see. All right, so this is another way to connect to this, not through my the normal way that I would do this, but we're in the server. I apologize for all of that. So let's show this here. And now looking at the instructions from Sounds Essentials, we'll need to include some of these instructions as part of our process. And I'll include this link in the chat. Starting with here, we need to make some updates. And the reason why we need to do all of this is because the base package that we get with Ubuntu does not include all of the patches, all of the upgrades that we are going to need to complete the rest of the Keycloak process.
So this is what you were attempting to do from the terminal, and now you're doing it locally.
Yeah.
on the machine.
I was just attempting to get into this command line area. I don't know why it wasn't working from terminal. That had never happened to me before. But clearly it didn't like something, which I'll figure out after we're done here. But in the meantime, we can use this. What we're seeing here is exactly what we would be seeing on the other end. All right. All right, so this is the last thing we're gonna run this command. Sudo shutdown R now is going to reboot the server. So pretty soon we're going to get kicked out of here. We haven't already. Yep, they were unable to connect, and that's because it's rebooting. All right, we're back in. Okay, so we've completed all of these necessary processes, and now we're going to go through the actual processes of installing Keycloak on the server. And that includes these instructions. All right. So start off by doing CD, and CD is just going to a directory. So now we're just going to the root directory of the server. And we're installing MySQL. All right. So now SQL Server has actually been installed on the server. Now, prior to running this script, there's a step that they did not include in their instructions that I found is actually needed. So we're going to run that now. So this is actually opening up the MySQL server, and we're going to add a step. And what this is doing is adding an alternative user of root for the server with the password of Keycloak1 with an exclamation point. Oh, I know what it is. It didn't like how I copied for whatever reason, wherever I copied the single quotes from, it did not like that single quote format. So I just have to go back and fix the single quotes. Cool. Okay, cool. And that's all we need to do there. Exit. And we're back out of here. So now we can run this command. Enter password. Okay, so actually what we needed to do was I think we have to run like to set up a validate password. And we can see here. I'm gonna click yes. I normally just choose 0 for low. Change the password for the root, no. Remove anonymous users, we want to do that. And here, let me there, remove anonymous users. Move login remotely. Yes. Remove test database and access to it. Yes. Reload privileges. Yes. Done. So now when we the next step where we're going to actually create a MySQL database. So we're going to run sudo MySQL, and then things that he didn't include there, but we need to include are u root and then -p and then the password that we created. Now we're in. Now it's just a lot of copying and pasting. Copy this, paste it in there. Copy this, paste it in here. And I'm going to use the same password in here that I used out there. And exit. All right, so now we're going to reboot the server. And while the server is rebooting, I think you were into something before about this location. I think we need to go to this location, and because I've used this IP address before, that's why it's failing that method. So we're going to do that while it's rebooting the server. So it's users.
Justin, can you hear me?
Yep.
I think because I looked to see what would come up in Google for that error message, and there's a couple of entries that suggest running a terminal command to edit the host file, and I'm going to put something in the chat. Again, I'm not familiar with the commands themselves. And where's the chat?
Here we go. And see, this is it right here. You can see this is the line up here when we were running, not that one, but this one, EC2.3-17-2241. That's this exact code. So I believe if we delete this and this, and
Yeah,
probably this one as well, and I'm just going to remove everything down here and save this file. I believe now if we try again to log in, it should work. Awesome. Oh. Cool. So that was the issue that we were running into.
And Justin, just for reference,
Yep.
I think I've added in chat a terminal command that is meant to remove for a given host name the existing entries in the host file. So if you have some like mixed records in your host files and you're getting that message, if you say, hey, wipe out the entries, then it should be good. And the article I point to just above that terminal command has another suggestion, I think, which equates to what you did, because they're basically saying someone can use Vim to edit the host file. And I think there's a third option there anyway. So it looks like you're in, so we're all good.
And that's what I get for practicing beforehand, because I went in and ran this whole process beforehand with a different key pair, which is why it was looking for that old key pair instead of the new one that I just created. So that's the issue that happened there. So anyway, thanks, Robert, for that. We've installed MySQL, which is necessary, and now we're going to install and configure SSL, an SSL certificate, and this will allow it to be on the web and usable. So again, we're just following the steps here, and actually, from this point on, all of the steps we're just going to follow exactly what they put in here, but still a good practice to take, and we'll walk through all of these. So what we're installing now is an application called CertBot. And what CertBot is used as a tool to allow you to create a SSL certificate on the fly. Now, this SSL certificate won't work for FileMaker, because FileMaker requires some additional security on SSL certificates, as I'm sure we've all seen, but it will work for a website like this. So you can see the last thing we did, which is this sudo shutdown, which is just a reboot of the server. So this will take a few minutes to run, and you can see when I'm in SQL, when I'm in the Linux server, it shows this as like the line for me to run. When I'm outside of it, it shows this, which tells me that I'm back onto the computer. Let's go back here. Let's see if it's up or if it, oh, it's back up. So that happened quickly. So now we're gonna install some firewalls, which are obviously important. So the first firewall is allowing for SSH. Now we're going to be allowing for port 80. And then port 8443, which as you remember, we added as a port earlier in the security groups. And finally, we're going to enable, and it's going to ask us to confirm. And if I didn't include my IP address as an SSH available SSH port, this would kick me off right now. All right, so going down and obtaining his SSL certificate. So this is a command that they have. The only change that we have to make to it is, instead of my domain, I'm going to use my domain, which is keylogic.com. They have this --dry run here because they want you first to run a dry run on this to confirm. It was successful. So now you just run the exact same command without the dry run. And I don't want them to send me advertisements. Cool. It was successful. We're ready to move on. And now we're actually going to deny port 80. This was the only reason why we needed port 80. Cool. So now we're just setting up a process which will auto renew the SSL certificate every year. So we don't have to do that. So this command shows us the different items that we can call. And we're just gonna go and run this one. And then and we can check the status of the timer at any time using this. Finally, we're going to run this command. And now it opens up. We're pretty much creating a .sh file. And what we're doing here is we're allowing port 80 when we want to run when they want to run that command to install a new SSL certificate. And the reason why we have to do this is because the SSL certificates only last for a year. So we've saved this, and now we're gonna exit. So this file has been created.
Justin, if I can, I don't think it matters much, but if we're talking about let's encrypt, I'm sorry. I think the renewal is shorter than a full year. I think it's either every 3 months or every 30 days or something like that. But
3
Certbot-
months.
yeah, so Certbot takes care of it anyways. So the frequency doesn't really matter much, but I
Right.
just think it's not lasting a year. So.
Okay, cool. So yeah, this process is doing it. Thanks, Robert, for letting me know. We're just gonna save this. And so what we just added is to the reinstallation process, which will happen automatically. We added a hook to open port 80, and then when it's done, close port 80. That, and then we're gonna do a quick dry run of the renewal. And it worked. Cool. So we are done there. Now we're going to move on to the next article, 3 out of 4. Any questions so far?
Nicely done working through it.
Thank you. So I'm going to go back and just click CD to go back to our root folder and run this script, which is going to install OpenJDK, which is Java on the server. So it's going to go through and run that process. You know the processes are done when it gives you this back. So we're gonna run this next command. And I believe wget is just a tool that allows you to extract zip files. Actually, maybe this is what we're installing is the one that's doing that. All right. Now we're creating a director. mkdir means make directory. So we just created a directory for Keycloak. And now we're going to run this script, which is going to get Keycloak and install it on get a zip file of Keycloak and install it on the server. And install it into the opt Keycloak location. So now we're going to unzip it. So I believe wget is a tool that allows you to install a file from WebLink And then the zip app that we installed allows you to zip and unzip a file. So we unzipped it. So now we're going to remove that zip file because we have its contents. We're going to create a group, going to add a user. Now we're going to this folder. And again, just following the instructions that they have here, which are pretty great. So now we're going to go in and update some of the instructions in here. This comes with the database, and we're going to come in here and change some things, or it comes with that zip file and everything that was included. First thing is we're going to change, we're using MySQL. So we're going to give MySQL. DB username is Keycloak. So that one we just have to put that. Password is the password we created, which is we're not opening that one. So now we're going to go and open up the server certification path. All right. This next one. Right, and then finally, all the way at the bottom. We are going to save that, exit. All right, now we're on to the final step. Any questions about that process? All right. So now we're actually creating and opening Keycloak. All right, so this is pretty much the process that boots up Keycloak for the first time. So it's going to run a bunch of different steps in here, and we'll know that it's ready for us when it gets to when these start opening up. So now if we go in a browser to, so eventually when when it gets to that process here, it will, there we go. It'll show up there. So I think we just got to that process. Yep, profile, yep. So now, cool. So we have something. The server's up and running. Now we're going to need to make a few more take a few more steps, and then we're good to go. So let's go back in here. So we need to click stop Keycloak by clicking Control Z and run some more steps. And we're just going to copy this whole thing over. No need to change anything there. So what we've done there is we've enabled the service basically. So now we're just going to reboot the server. And we're on the home stretch now. It's still, the server's still rebooting, which is why it's giving me that. Oh, cool. So now we're just, we're going to check to make sure that Keycloak is running. And it's active, which is perfect. Cool. So now we're just going to make a couple of small changes. Here, we're going to change, instead of using port 443, or instead of using port 8443, we're going to use just the regular port 443, which is what will be used here. And then, oh, shoot, we need to go back in there. Jump the gun there. All the way at the bottom. We're going to add this, just telling us to use port 443. Now we're going to adjust our file to use port 443 instead. So that's what this process is doing. And then we're going to remove port 443 as a port 8443 as a port that's available, and instead use port 443. And if you look at our statuses, you can see port 80 is denied, port 22, which is the SSH port, which is what we're using right now, is allowed, and port 443 is allowed. And then finally, we're going to reboot the server. And when the server comes back up, this should be available. And so it's not going to be available right now because it's rebooting. But once this rebooting process is done, then the Keycloak server should be available. So it's still going through that process of rebooting. Okay, so now it should work. All right, so now we're in, and we have our username. And if I use the password that we've been using, I'm in, and that's it. So now, from this point on, you would follow last month's video, and that would take us through the rest of the process for configuring your Keycloak server to have it set up correctly with FileMaker. Now, one final step that I would take now is I would come into my EC2 server. I would find that instance. and actually change its size. So I'd stop the instance, which is what you have to do. And once it shows that it's stopped, then you can actually in AWS just change the size of the server. And I would change it to I would change it to a T3A small, and then just start it back up again. Because we don't need that large of a server for what it's doing. All right, any questions?
Thank you for sharing, Justin, and walking us through the setup. The questions I have are more in terms of the overall use and the deployment itself. You know, I'm just a bit curious because I'm going to say acquainted to external authentication where the whatever we're relying on to authenticate is either on the network itself, you know, or we're talking about something like Azure. And if you can't see Azure, then you have other issues than just your FileMaker stuff, you know. And usually if it's with Azure, it's because the business itself relies on a ton of other things that are Microsoft based. So, but here it's really on this one box that's on a cloud, and it can control access to what is being used to do work in FileMaker. And for a lot of people, it runs their business, you know. So I really like the fact that when we have external authentication, we don't have to create accounts in each of the files, you know, and I really like having multiple files in a system for different reasons. You know, I know there's this kind of a pendulum swing in between using a single file and using multiple files and all those things. But all in all, I'm like, okay, well, if I have this set up and my users are not in as local accounts in the files, you know, and then we lose connection to Keycloak, then we're kind of locked out, right?
Well, yeah. If you can't access Keycloak to do the authentication, then I mean it would be the same as if you couldn't access, you know, Google or Microsoft.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And aside from the deployment and it being outside of the file, because it is what it is, it's external authentication, would you deploy that in a multi-tenant fashion, or would you be more likely to say, well, anyone who needs to rely on Keycloak needs to have their own Keycloak instance?
So, and I walked through this in when we did this last time around, but you can create multiple what they call realms, your Keycloak account.
Yes.
So you can have a single Keycloak account with multiple realms, one for each of your different clients. So, and we've actually set that up for ourselves, and for a situation where we have one database that we want to use completely internally, and another database, or another server, I should say, that we're using with clients. And so we have two different realms set up, one for each situation.
Okay, on the same Keycloak server.
Same Keycloak server, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Justin, on the chat, they're asking where the prior month's video can be found.
So we posted it on the in the CFDG group chat.
The group IO.
the IO group. And we'll go ahead and when we post this one, after this, we'll include last month's as well, so that somebody, if you just need that one email to find everything.
So yeah, so if anyone's new to the group and wants to be part of the group chat, just please put into the chat your email address and we'll send you an invitation.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions about this process, about Keycloak? Anything else while
How about-
while we're here?
How about security with multiple tenants? Do you have any concerns or issues with that?
So our tenants never actually, so our tenants don't actually go into and manage the passwords for other users. So they would not even know that the other clients have access to this server. And you can keep it completely separate. When you set up your server instance, when you set up your server, the admin console on for the server, you determine which Keycloak quote unquote realm you would use. And that would be what would determine when a user tries to log in, which whether they're an account on that realm or not. So if you had a user in company A who tries to log in on, for example, company B's server using their email address from company A, they're not going to be allowed in because company B has a different realm, Keycloak realm that they would be using. Does that make
Oh,
sense?
you have your clients actually go in and add any users.
No, we add the users ourselves, but here, it might be helpful for me to show this so that it makes a little bit more sense. So if I go into the Keycloak account, the one that we just created. So what I'm logging into now is the administrator side of things. You can create other administrators in here, but you don't have to. Now there's a realm that automatically gets added called the master realm, and you can add new realms. So you could create a realm and call it, for example, company 1. And then you can add another realm called company 2. And when you add users, you would be adding users to company 2 for company 2, and then you would be adding users for company 1 to company 1. And let's say I added a user, I added Bob to company 1. Bob would not, if you were looking at company 2, Bob would not exist.
Yeah, okay.
And on the FileMaker side, and we can actually show that as well, on our admin console. And again, we walked through this process last time. So if you watch that video,
Yeah.
it'll make sense. But here, when we set up the external authentication, you would set up your client ID, your client secret, and all of these codes are unique to that specific realm.
Okay.
So, so that's kind of where the security between the different user groups would come into play.
And there's no API to the Keycloak yet?
Yes, there is actually. I was waiting for a good time to mention that. So now that you brought it up.
You talk about that.
Yeah, so I've been experimenting with the REST API that is included with Keycloak. It allows you to do almost any administrator action that you want to on Keycloak. If you want, I could send the resource page for everything. Here, let me send it in the chat. But I haven't dug too deep into it, but there is an API, and I was able to create a user in a specific realm with a specific set of credentials. I need to still figure out how to assign it to a specific group, but there is an API for this.
Yeah, see, that
So
would be
just-
cool, because then they could do it within, a manager could do it within FileMaker, right?
Yes, exactly, and that's one of the things that I'm experimenting. But I just sent that resource in the chat if you want to check that out.
I will, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so that would allow you to kind of go full circle where you can do everything from FileMaker, but have all of the accounts and everything get set up in Keycloak. So you don't have to manage users using FileMaker's built-in tools.
Yeah, the worst case, if it's a multi-file, if they're using multiple files, you could set up the same script in multiple files. They would have to go into each file and do it. But
Well, no.
no, that's right. No, they wouldn't.
You would use groups. So
That's right.
once that you add them to Keycloak and assign them to a group, then they would be able to get into FileMaker.
So they could do it once in any file.
Yeah, as long as you.
And it should work.
Yeah, as long as there's a group that you assign them to that would give them access to that file.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So, and Robert, to answer your question, that would be a use case where that would become probably a lot more valuable and useful.
I'm sorry, my question?
Well, what you were bringing up earlier about why would you use Keycloak? And this would be an example of why, because you'd be able to create users from.
Oh,
within-
yeah, no, absolutely. I get that external authentication saves us from a lot of issues when we have multiple files and when we need the accounts replicated in each of them and all those things. So
Right.
it was more about being like the risk of being disconnected from what lets you in, so.
Got it.
Yeah, you have that risk, but you also have that risk that they can't get to the FileMaker server too. Now, if it's in-house, then you don't really, I guess you don't really have that much.
Yeah, and you can, like I said, I'm more accustomed to either it being Azure or it being on the venue itself. But again, Keycloak doesn't need to be on AWS. Someone could say, hey, we're gonna put it on a machine we have locally. So
Exactly.
and it's more like theoretical than anything. I think in and of itself, it's a good thing. It's just, I think I'm still in a setup where most of what I get to see, like as systems being deployed, my own or even anything that I see outside, if I inherit a new system, chances are that system is going to have local accounts and not external authentication. But that's I'm sure it's bound to change over time.
Yeah, and this definitely isn't a, one size fits all solution. But when the time comes where you have a client who comes to you and says, we need two-factor authentication because our security team has told us that we require it. You don't have to go and try to, muster something up in FileMaker. You can just set up a Keycloak server for them.
Yeah, I just came across a client that has multiple clients with multiple files and trying to solve that same issue of, creating users in every single file. And some of them are using Google. So, okay, you can hook up to the Google authentication, but not all of them do.
Right.
So now you got to make the file adaptable to Google, but maybe adaptable to just FileMaker users, or maybe to Microsoft or to something else. This way, you just say, no, it's going to be Keycloak, and we'll put everybody, we write the script to, you can add whoever you need to Keycloak, and that's our second, authentication part.
Yeah, and something that's cool with Keycloak is that you can actually have Keycloak then redirect to Google or Microsoft. And I think we showed this last week or last month. And in that process, you can give the person the option, depending on if they're a Google user, using one of the Google accounts for the company or not, of either logging in through their Keycloak account or through Google.
Mm-hmm.
So really give them a lot of options in the process.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else that you guys would like to chat about? Either with Keycloak or if there's another subject.
In the beginning, so you use terminal to connect over SSH to the server. And now if you wanted to establish an SSH connection from any other device, all that would be required is the PEM, that key, that lets you connect. You need to have that on the other device that you want to connect from, and you're good, right? Or you need to whitelist the other device in some other form.
You need to whitelist the IP address of that device.
Okay.
So, and you do that here in the, so you actually have some options. First of all, you can remember the security group that we created. I think I actually opened up, so you could do what I did with this file is I literally opened up this file as SSH to the world. So in this situation, you could connect to it via SSH from anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you could say, I just want to do my, this is my IP address. And so I only want my IP address. And then you can obviously add more rules. And you can go and add, Bob's IP address as well. And so you could kind of go either route. I would open up the SSH to the world because that's considered a not a clean thing to do. But it's definitely possible. And if you need to in a pinch, you can open it up to the world to go in there and do something and then close it back up.
Okay.
And then something else that I didn't do earlier, but I would normally remove port 8443 as well after you're done with the process, because you won't need that port anymore.
Okay. Great. Well, aside from Keycloak, I think when we asked in the beginning, like if there's stuff that's new since last month, I put a couple items that came to my mind in the chat early on.
Okay.
So to me, it was interesting to see. I think MBS came up with a feature in its pre-release where it lets you collapse, some script steps. It's not going to save it for you, but still, when you're browsing the script, it can help to look into that. There's also Kevin Frank, who published something about a new set of custom functions for JSON, making use of, I forget the name of the function. I think it's get element type or get element, something like that. That lets you know if a portion of JSON is a number or null or a string or a JSON object or a JSON array. So like he's got some stuff in there. Like one that is interesting is a custom function that lets you merge two JSON objects. I think it does arrays also, but to me the merge on objects is more interesting, and it's not a shallow merge, you know, like just the top level item. It navigates the tree somehow and merges things together. So that's nice. And there's Matt Petrosky that published a video on performance, and he talked about a command line utility called JQ. I think it stands for JSON query or something like that. But it looks like it lets you take an existing JSON and then like filter the contents to get things that match like a criteria. You know, it's like you can run a query against JSON. So it's something nice to explore, and it should be supported by the base element plugin sometime soon. I don't know when, but it was pointing in that direction.
Cool. Thanks, Robert. So wrapping things up for this CFDG, are there any topics or items that anybody would have any interest in either presenting on or discussing next month?
Well, I don't know if there's something about Studio that has been covered. I know, like, they've been, I don't know if I can say releasing new features, you know, because it's not available to the general public. But I don't have access to Studio, but I'm still curious about what is being fleshed out and things like that. So I don't know if talking about that would be something nice for people. I just feel like we were teased when they spoke about it at Auto Enter, and I hope they're gonna publish it sometime soon for everyone who would like to hop in, because there's some things that are making me curious in there, basically.
Yeah. Well, we don't currently have Claire Studio, but we should be getting a copy of it soon when we sign one of our clients up. I'm not sure if we'll be prepared to to discuss it by next month's CFDG. That could be a TBD thing. I'm not sure if anybody else here has any info or has a copy of it and would like to present.
Yeah, and again, I was not necessarily thinking of next month specifically, but we can keep that on the roadmap or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And I know the Claris folks have mentioned wanting to join some of these user groups to discuss, I think, more on the sales side of the platform bundle program. But I think by the time our next CFDG comes around, this program will be will have ended. So I don't know if they would want to present at that point, but we can definitely ask.
All good.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. We've got the email addresses that were sent over the chat. So we'll add you to our user group, and then send out an email with some links to this video and the video from our previous time, so that we can, you guys can go and start building a Keycloak server for yourself.
Looking forward to it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Justin.
All right. Have a great day.
Have a good day, everyone.
Take care.
Go.